stuff every week, is they're still imitating what they think a radio show or a TV show is, right?
Yeah.
So they sit down and they come up with their structure and everything, and then they come on presenting as like, da 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 da, and this week we're gonna do blah 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 blah, and they'll often say, and before the show we were talking about this, and the stuff that Niall and I got into is, I would essentially just turn this on, and we would figure out all the behind the scenes stuff on air, and then launch into it, and so our stuff had I thought a much more interesting kind of like postmodern folding back on itself.
I understand.
The middle of the show often ended up being the beginning of the show, and it just made it a little bit more interesting because the understanding was everything was going to be about an hour long, and so people still have the comfort of knowing what they're going to get, right? Because when I listen to my Trash Art Movies podcast, or when I listen to my Sound Opinions podcast, it's like they can do whatever they want as long as I know, like, these are the boundaries, right? This is like the frame of what's going on. And what we were talking about in the park that I really liked was this idea that these shows, they're always like, and next week we're going to do this, and this. And part of the fun about being a busy dad is that you don't get to do shit most of the time.
It's like,
and it's been really funny that, like, for the first...
to do that,
Right.
but what ended up happening was I had the stomach flu. And
The first, like, 3 or 4 months that we were trying to get together, something was always, somebody was sick, or there was some family thing, or there's a work thing. And I was like, instead of having this be an issue, let's turn this into the format, right? So we get together, and it's like, well, this is what we were interested in. Did people actually read the book? You know, maybe there's a backlog. Maybe it's that nobody got anything done except everybody saw Mad Max and wanted to see that. As long as there's daddies and there's science fiction and there's a love of, like, talking about science fiction, I feel like that other stuff is very 20th century.
And that's as we left our last meeting, that's kind of where I thought we would roll tape.
Yeah.
Talk about it, because that's interesting.
Well, and one of my favorite podcasts is Stuff You Should Know, and they're always talking right in the beginning how, man, you know, I really wish we would record the first 10 minutes of this. And we're talking, and I'm always going, why don't you, dude? Like, why don't you record those first 10 minutes? When, like, you guys are coming up with the, like, you know, I don't know, I had a headache, so I didn't get through half the research for this thing, so I'm just going to wing it. One of the guys is hungover, and, you know.
So then the question is, have we been recording this?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yes.
Yeah, because the other thing too, the podcast
I have to put my voice on.
Right. As I was saying, it's the personalities, right?
Yeah.
It's like this Canadian film podcast that I listen to. They figured out after about a year that they do this thing where they take an art film and then, like, a trash film that are thematically related somehow. And then they argue about which one is probably a better time and stuff. And it's like, that's all well and good, but, like, what's really interesting is sort of more of them, who they are, right? That personal drama, that personal story. Like with the Avengers, I haven't seen the new Avengers movie, but all the podcasts that I listen to, it's like everybody knows there's going to be fights, right? Everybody knows there's going to be monsters from the galaxy. It's always about, what's the witty thing that Iron Man gets to say, right? What's going on with him? What's that person soap opera?
What did he say?
And that's the thing, like with the dads, I feel like if dads listen to this, they're going to appreciate the fact that it's not just that we're talking about science fiction, it's that it's about the life of the dad and science fiction.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how does that affect everything? Like, with my daughter the other day, there's some movie where she showed some interest in, like, Labyrinth or something, and I got so excited because she doesn't really like science fiction, doesn't really like movies, and I was like, we can start. She's like 5 years old. I was like, we can start, and then I was like, no, she wants to do Strawberry Shortcake.
There's a part of me that cannot wait until my son is scared of a Skeksis from Dark Crystal.
Right.
Like, there's just this part of me that has this fear.
Is that the three-eyed gorilla?
No, it's
that's the craning vulture.
The craning vulture that they're trying to steal his kingly wand from in the beginning of Dark Crystal. That there's this ingrained fear of me that I kind of want to morbidly pass on to my son. You know?
Well, that's the same. We have Secret of Nim on DVD,
So
and
good.
I think B-Dub has seen far worse in the modern movies. But for that one, I'm like, oh, I don't want to show him that one, man. It's kind of like harsh. But he's already seen the Box Trolls, which is.
All right.
I was there when you saw that. And
you were there when
that
that
looked like there was some neural pathways.
Yeah,
being
we
formed.
were like, dude, are you okay? You can't unring that bell. Yeah.
Oh man,
You're probably doing all right. My father, because he's an idiot, watched Ms. 45 with my younger brother when he was 6 years old.
Which is horrible. That movie hurts.
I mean, that's a trauma.
Those scenes. What was the compilation horror flick? Something of Terror. It was a full feature length that compiled all the
Tales.
No. It was a feature length that compiled all the scary.
Horror in the Aisle?
Yeah,
Terror in the Aisle.
Terror in the
Aisle.
Aisle.
Yeah.
And there are scenes from Miss 45 after she hits that dude in the face with an iron, and he's still in a shower, and it's like a dude.
I know.
That.
It's
And maybe it's
terrifying.
not even Miss 45, but that movie, those stuff.
I know.
Well, I saw Jaws at 4, and my dad took me, and it blew my mind.
I saw Excalibur when I was 5, and that definitely, talk about shaping neural pathways. To this day, nothing in my life will ever be that exciting.
Krull somehow blew my mind.
That was great.
Later. I don't know. Yeah.
Krull was a seek out for me. Krull was like because I got into horror really young. I was watching like Friday the 13th, and not the scary. And then it was when I saw the original Night of the Living Dead. I actually remember my sister walking in and saying, "You look like you've seen a ghost."
Right.
And that movie changed me. But that was led to the seeking out of things that would independently scare me.
Because you get a taste for it.
You get a taste for it.
I saw Eraserhead when I was in 8th grade, and that movie disturbed me more than...
I don't think you should see that movie
As
at
it
35.
should.
Like, you should
I mean, it really... But again, as a therapist, you realize, like, when you get traumatized by something, it changes you, and you sort, like you said, you get a taste for it. You start getting into it. And so it was, again, like that, like, okay, so there's this David Cronenberg movie called Videodrome. Is that going to upset me as much as Eraserhead did? Like, what's that about?
I learned things about the great white shark in college to kind of transmutate that.
Oh, right.
And I know things that lay people shouldn't know about that animal's physiology because of that, man. But it is now a comfort film.
Okay.
If I was sick, I would eat soup and watch Jaws.
It's the same with Blue Velvet. I just watched Blue Velvet when I was sick because even though that movie sent me around the clock, around the block, whatever, really messed me up, it's now just this like, oh yeah, this is the part where Frank, rapes him and the fat woman dances on the car. Like, oh, that's cool.
There's something about that because I will show some of these movies to my wife, and she will end that experience going, I got absolutely nothing out of that. Like I was terrified, but I would not repeat that experience simply because I was terrified. And me, I can see the deeper levels of it. I can see like, oh, but it was a good movie. It scared you because of this, this, and this. And there's just something that sort of washes over that. I just don't want to experience that.
I don't do that stuff much anymore. I don't like to watch.
You were really into it, even in college, I remember.
Yeah. I'm resensitized, is what I called it, man.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I still love it.
Crazy
I love
for me.
it. I love the scary, man. I love not the gore, but the scary.
I get into it if it's weird. I like the scary weird, right? But just the straight up conventions, the thing outside the window, the thing in the basement. That's never really been where I've been at.
Well, I caught Ex Machina since we've met.
Okay, well then
Have you seen it?
No.
Have you seen?
I've seen it.
You went and saw it.
Yeah.
I'm not a big Alex Garland appreciator.
See, fortunately, I wouldn't even know who he was, so I get in the theater.
Okay, all right.
But
he wrote Sunshine.
That's I remember liking that.
He wrote The Beach.
Okay.
I think he did 28 Days Later. I think that was him.
That was it. No, the Nora said that was him.
Yeah.
That was cool. I
Was
really
it great?
dug that. I
Was
thought
it
it
really
was
great?
great.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was really good. this is going to be a continuing theme. I thought it was really good until the end, where I couldn't separate the doofusness of like, well, way to go, dude! Your actions just led to this, this, and this.
Yeah.
From the rest of the movie,
that.
but at the same time, it's rad. It's a dope movie.
I have a 15-year-old half brother, and he likes sci-fi, and he speaks this language. And I was telling him, I was like, I saw Ex Machina, man. He's like, oh, I heard that's rad. My father chimes in, he goes, nope. And I go, what? And he goes, I look up all the movies that my son and I see, your brother, and that one has explicit sexual scenes, and I was like, it does?
But they're with a robot, right?
Well, but that's
So it
what I
doesn't
was like.
count.
I was sitting there going, well, yeah, I mean, I was telling him, I go, Riley, I mean, there are beautiful models there, but they're peeling off their skin, showing you their cyborg insides. I mean, for me, it was a full disconnect. Like, there's one humping scene, because Homeboy's doing his model that he made, his machine, but the story was so cool that kind of stuff, you know, nudity shots, there's some pretty good, some hairy, slow knife violence that goes in.
It's a rough scene, yeah.
But the story carried it to where I was like, you'd show this to a 15-year-old, and I was like, oh yeah, the Brazilian wax job on the beautiful Asian cyborg. Okay, you probably don't want to show that to him, but
So it was really good. It was like good science fiction.
I think so.
It was different.
Once again,
Yeah,
I don't get out much, so it was. I was into it though.
Okay.
It was different enough, I felt. Well, also, I felt like the ending was just a little kind of like...
Well, what is it? It's the thing that I heard was like she's playing everyone.
Pretty much.
Is that the whole deal?
Yeah. She's playing a game
okay.
to suit her own...
So it's
suit her
sort
own
of like
AI's
a, sort of
win.
like a film noir thing where there's a femme fatale and he gets into her, but she's got something going on, but except she's a cyborg.
And so she
Doesn't
escapes.
sound bad. I mean,
Yeah,
it sounds,
it's basically the Turing test with another level where not only is she passing the Turing test, but she's doing it in a way that the audience never even imagined. You know? She's fooling everybody, not just passing the test.
And you thought that like all the twists were unnecessary?
No, I just had trouble.
Awesome, thank you.
I had trouble removing the lead character's motivations with the mess.
He screwed up.
He screws up.
He screws up.
Oh.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy, guys.
He just hoses it and gets locked in a sealed billionaire's laboratory while the AI
Bounces into
flies
the real
out,
world.
walks away, and
Yeah.
gets picked up by the helicopter because they're in this remote place.
Oh.
And she goes to the world, and he's there to like use the rest of
okay.
the oxygen and die. And that's the one thing, because the blunder is, why would you ever, even if you were tricked by this beautiful cyborg, ruse the confines of you're in an experiment,
Yeah.
and this thing never ever gets to get its plan done.
And he's a super
And he, like,
smart
"No, I'm
guy.
okay."
He's a super smart guy who ends up making a really dumb decision.
I think I heard that.
you
Yeah.
know? And that dumb decision leads to his doom, the other guy's murder. You know, it's
See, that's the thing with the other movies that this guy has done. That I feel like he always comes up with some really inexcusable way to conveniently go in some direction that he wants to at the end. Like I don't remember the beach enough. I didn't really like the beach enough to really like remember it. But I remember like with Sunshine.
Oh,
I
we're gonna
remember,
be started on
I was
Sunshine.
really into it at first.
And then he MTV'd it. He like
Right,
shook
and then
the
it's
camera.
like the dudes show up and it's like they're from We've Been Burned, or it was just, it got really stupid.
Yeah.
And then with 28 Days Later, I really liked it too, until it was like, oh, I want to make some statement about how humans are even worse than zombies, so I'm going to take you to this army outpost and show you how horrible these army guys are. Even when I felt like there wasn't much reason for them to be there, like for them to go there, it was just like he's making this executive editorial decision because he wants to put his stuff there. But in the business, when I was a screenwriter, we always called it invisible bullets, right? When you like cheat your way into some direction or some character motive that's not there, it's like there is an invisible bullet. And I feel like he does. I mean, shit, he gets away with it, so why not keep doing it?
Yeah.
He's a produced guy. He's had all these movies made. Now he's making his own movies. What I was excited is that with the state of like Hollywood, it seems like the middle class is totally eroded in a lot of ways. And Ex Machina looked like a cool middle class science fiction movie, right? Like not like a Transformers huge scale Avengers type thing, but also not like a tiny little art film that like Pi or something, right? That's just like
No,
whatever.
it was a high def. Yeah, it's what you're saying.
Yeah.
I thought that was cool that was because I feel like that stuff is more what you see on television now. So I was like, that's kind of cool that they're doing that with movies.
It felt it
Still.
was a really nice zone to be in. I said, I wish I could read this. When I left Dr. Machina, that's what I said. That would have been a cool read.
That's an interesting way to go about
Wow.
it. And the one thing about it was, and it goes back to 28 Days Later, it's really easy to make your other characters likable, even if they're zombies, if you have this group of characters that's so unlikable and despicable that you have no choice but to go, okay, well, at least they're not this bad. At least they're not a group of rapist soldiers.
Really
And,
easy to do.
At least they're not an alcoholic, egomaniac, inventor who's...
Did you see 28 Weeks Later? I really like that.
I
one.
really liked it.
Now that's a grim, harsh movie.
Yeah.
That I felt like did not pull any punches, did not play to any particular crowd. It was just like, this is our vision, this is what's going to happen, and bam, here we go.
Still one of the best, easily for a zombie movie, one of the best opening sequences I've seen in a long time.
That's the one with Robert Carlyle?
Robert Carlyle,
Yeah.
they're in the farmhouse, they're hiding out, and they let in the little boy. And he's shoveling food into his mouth, and they're just like, how many are following you? He says, loads of them, and it's an onslaught onto this little cabin, and it's just Robert Carlyle running his ass off, and you look, and you feel that anxiousness of, how the hell is he going to get away from all these people? Yeah.
Was that, and Jeremy Renner's in that one, right?
Jeremy Renner's
okay,
in
good,
that,
that's the one I'm
Rose
thinking
Byrne,
of.
yeah.
Yeah. I really respected that.
Yeah.
I definitely, that's the movie, like, when I see a certain kind of sci-fi or horror movie, and I leave the theater and it makes me feel ashen. And I'm just sort of like, kind of dead, and I'm just sort of like, oh, I'm like, they did it.
And it wasn't...
They hit the sweet spot.
And it wasn't tremendously well received. I mean, it didn't have the Danny Boyle-ness, I guess. It didn't have
No,
the...
people like his stuff. Well, he's so like, I feel like his camera, or something about him, people just love him. I don't know why. I don't like him. But because again, it was like, I felt like everything with that sequel was about this aesthetic of this emotion, this feeling, this thing that they were doing. And so there wasn't any grandstanding with camera work. There wasn't any like, except for the beginning, there weren't any like big set pieces. It was just like, if the world was ending,
That's what it was.
this is how it's going to
It was
be.
scene to scene, just, there's no escape. This is going to continually get worse. I think the last shot of the movie is just like, everything's gone to hell, pretty much. They're in Paris.
The
and-
entire world, and the zombies have taken over the metro. They've run out of the
That's
metro
right.
onto the
You
streets.
hear like a radio signal go, That was
Had y'all read World War Z?
I haven't, but I saw the movie. I guess the Brad Pitt movie.
No.
I heard not to touch that.
I really liked it.
Yeah.
I mean, only in the sense that one, when I read about it, they didn't have a script. Like they were making it up as they went along, which is really hard to do.
It went through so many rewrites.
Right.
J. Michael Straczynski wrote one that was a direct adaptation that then went to like so many different polishers.
The way that the movie ended up is like the opposite of 28 Weeks Later. Is it's just one set piece after another. There's the set piece of the initial pathogen invasion. Then there's the set piece of getting out of New Jersey. And then there's the set piece of him going to the other place. And it's just, so if you're watching it like a strung together series of music videos, these set pieces are like filmed in a very classical, like the camera's pulled back so you see what's going on, so it's really like intense and scary. But Brad Pitt never takes a shower, never changes his pants. He's on like an aircraft carrier, and then he's like on a plane that drops him here, and it's like he's the most rubbery. Like it could have been like like it could have been one of the Yo Gabba Gabba creatures that have been running around because nothing affects him. He's just sort of like, well, now we have to get here.
Well, that's
Time to go to Israel.
And here we
Israel's
go.
gone.
Spook Country felt like that.
Well, let's get
I
into
called
it.
Spook Country could be summed up in one word from this man's side, and that was cute. It just sort of happened. Everyone was made of rubber, and it fucking finished.
Yeah, there were seemingly all these MACHINA, like all these things happening behind the scenes. Like, it seemed like there were no real motivations. It was just sort of like, we're going from this point to this point to this point, and then the ending was super anticlimactic.
So,
did you get to read it?
Yeah, I read it.
Okay, you read it.
So
Wow,
let
we're all in on
me
this
let me
one.
give you the William Gibson fanboy take on it, because I've read everything he's written since the
Okay,
80s.
this is my first William Gibson.
Me too.
And there's two things that I feel like are very important to understand about him. And the first is that he writes trilogies. So this is book one.
Okay.
That's why it didn't seem like it had a real ending, because there's going to be two more, I am sure.
All right.
It never was Neuromancer. It was always Neuromancer, Count Zero, Mona Lisa Overdrive, and then it was Virtual Light, Vision, All Tomorrow's Parties, and Adoru. He just goes boom, boom, boom. 1, 2, 3.
Well, when would this book is like 2004 or something? Wouldn't they be written?
I don't know.
I believe I looked it up.
It takes place in
you said recent.
2006. So I'm assuming
I think it was like a 2004 title, but
Maybe he's got another one out there.
I
don't know.
believe you. Maybe
I don't
he's
know.
trying.
He's old.
Only
Maybe
there was
it's taking
something
him a
we
while.
could
Maybe-
access.
Does he also play with like cross-character novels?
Yeah, so a
Okay.
big influence with him was William Burroughs. So if you read like, what is it, like Cities of the Red Knight, Burroughs, I feel like, for me at least, was the first person who really set up the parallel storylines, right? Like every chapter is a different novel, and they start at some point interacting with each other. So it's really slow at first, but then you realize that the pirates are actually, the detective or blah, 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 and this stuff is like connecting. He started doing that with his second book, Count Zero, and I guess it worked for him because he's done it, I think, with pretty much everything that I've read since then. Maybe Virtual Light was different, I can't remember, but so he's really into this like triptych way of doing things. And then his other thing that I think is really interesting, even though I didn't think Spook Country was that good compared to the other stuff, is that he's like, his stories are like graphic novels, right? Like in this one you have the big industrialist, big end, right? And you have like the ex-punk rock woman. I mean, these are not like fleshed out characters, but his writing style is so interestingly like anal and idiosyncratic.
Everything is described.
I know.
Like,
it's almost like Asperger's syndrome, right?
Yeah,
It's that
every
you just
reaction.
So it's kind of interesting to me. So it's like, imagine going back and picking up some Marvel comic, like a vintage Daredevil or something, and then having some guy write it as a novel, but he's writing it thinking that not only is he writing lit, but he's writing the most interesting, transgressive, avant-garde lit around, and that's a really interesting combination for me, right? Like you don't usually see
You
those.
mean in his own head?
Well, no, when he's doing it, he's just doing it because like
that's what he believes he's doing.
But that's what that's I think where he's coming from,
Okay.
And so he's not interested. I mean, this whole book is like, it's all just the backstory, right? Because nothing happens. The only action is them shooting out this canister, right, in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. In a regular, more traditional book, that would have been the inciting incident, right? That would have been the thing that would have happened on page 30 or page 50, and then all of the drama and then all of the motive and everything from that. But he was interested in like, what's everything building up to that? So it's not like, I feel like at this point he's necessarily writing books because he's all that interested in like selling them or having, I mean, he has his fan base, right? So he's playing around with the conventions and what we expect and all this other stuff. And sometimes it works better than others. Like, I really liked the story about the woman who's trying to become a magazine writer, and she's getting into this whole like virtual art world in LA, and things are getting weird. I thought that was really cool. And I thought that after things really progressed, the thing about the guy who's being held captive because he can translate code or something, and he's a junkie, that was kind of interesting to me too. But the thing about like the dude who's like the parkour runner, that was so boring, Tito. I was like, every time I hit one of those chapters, I was like, oh Lord.
But I like the surrounding of, I mean, and that's the thing is, I liked all the characters, and I like I love something about the idea of like Cuban Santeria, like
spies.
New York.
Cuban Santeria spies, yes.
But it ended up becoming kind of a bad caper.
Nothing happened,
you know,
right?
nothing
Yeah, right.
happened.
He didn't go anywhere with it, which
Yeah.
is interesting because in his earlier stuff he does. Like his earlier stuff where he invents the internet before the internet exists, right? He called it cyberspace. Well, other people have called it that, but he was the first person to really write about it and write about hackers. And with his books, you jack in, there's always something behind your ear and you plug in. And so it's like all like the Matrix before it was the Matrix. He had this, like in the first trilogy, there are these like voodoo gods that suddenly appear in the internet because they have found a way to like, you know, like David Cronenberg says, it's like the new flesh. There's all this like weird heavy shit that's going on, and because he's not maybe hampered by his own success as a writer and feeling like he has to go in these different directions or stay in the present tense or whatever he's doing, those books are wild. I mean, they are totally wild and fun and interesting. With this one, I totally agree with you. I felt like he has like a million cool ideas. Like he's reading Wired magazine every month and writing down the cool shit and throwing it in there. But then it just, what does he do with it?
Yeah, and it's all there on the page. It's really slick. Like he's got a great freaking writing style, and like you're saying, this just is not necessarily indicative of what he's done in the past.
I mean, the other ones, he got into this. He'll get into these things like with the Virtual Light trilogy. He came up on this idea of in the near future, people were going to take over the Golden Gate Bridge and turn it into this sort of Occupy community, like before Occupy even existed. And so it's this city made of, glued together buildings, resin buildings, and cultures. And he gets like so into this, and it is so fucking boring. And he spends so much time like going back to this, like he's got this Australian bounty hunter character that's like running around like fucking people up with bowie knives and stuff, and it's like really cool. But then he gets hooked on this like this bridge shit, and it's just like, oh god, here we go, back to the bridge, back to this idea, and it's like, ugh. So I'm not like a total defender of his work, but I will say, I think what he's doing, his failing in this, is way more interesting than anything that could be considered remotely successful in Tigerman.
Which we did not call it initially. I mean, it was Tiger shit in all the text messages.
Mm-hmm. I don't get the love for this book. I'm sorry. I just
don't know either.
It is across the board, well received. People are saying, like, I read some reviews a couple weeks ago, and it was just, you know, that he manages to do something new every single novel.
I don't get it.
I don't get it.
It was like Graham Greene light with that, you know, his deal was the island, right? The island, which again was like this cool idea that then nothing happens with it, right? It's like, oh, the island is going to blow up and there's going to be toxic whatever. Oh, there's this fleet of like illegal people doing weird plastic surgery, cell stem, nanotech. And it's like
any bad thing is happening in this.
And then nothing. Like,
we're on something interesting here because I believe Spook Country and Tigerman are similar in their interesting concepts. Mm-hmm. And when you pitched from William Gibson Fanboy, it sort of made Spook Country make sense. And when you mentioned graphic novel, I actually felt a release. I was like, that's what was happening to me when I read it.
Okay.
Would someone be able to? What was the name of Tigerman's writer?
I don't know.
Harkaway.
I was going to look it up, and then I was like, why did that guy have more publicity?
He's some dude's son.
Could a Nick Harkaway's fanboy
Here you go.
pitch it with some background and make this book rise from the tiger dung?
I mean, wouldn't it be?
It
would be really interesting to talk to some of these critics who think that it's, you know, one, like good literature, and then like two, like a really good science fiction book, because I don't get it. And that's what really threw me for the loop, was that I was listening to the Wired Geeks Guide to Sci-Fi podcast, and they interviewed the dude, and they had nothing but praise for him and his stuff, and he sounded like a really cool, smart, laid-back guy. And what was really funny with him was like he was giving himself tremendous props for the whole comic book angle, which I thought was totally underdeveloped too, right?
Forced.
I can defer to George, our comic book expert here.
I thought the whole comic book angle was completely forced. If anything, to me, it felt like counterfeit. It felt like this was here to make me like this as a comic book fan and serve no bigger purpose. It was cheating.
I think it
what
was.
you call
I think it was
invisible
totally
bullets,
cheating. It was
you
an
know?
invisible bullet.
An invisible
There's
bullet.
no reason, as much as he might have loved that boy, there is no reason why he would have entered into that comic book superhero mindset to sort of help the boy and help himself.
Yeah.
And maybe you could have, if the character wasn't so insanely generic and boring, you could have put some things in there that made it make more sense, but it was such a force, right? And he's trying to say something about, like, how complicated our world is and how we try to reduce it to these easy things, but it's never easy because even the most innocent boy ends up being the villain.
Twist!
That book scared me,
I fucking
man.
got you.
Right.
You know, he kept saying, walk, take tea, say hello, and that kept going through my head as I'm reading the book. Like, Lester's going to walk, take tea, say hello. Next chapter, walk, take tea, say hello. I'm just waiting for something to happen. You're telling us all this cool stuff.
I mean, a science fiction, I feel like the genre of science fiction is basically the genre of ideas.
Yeah.
Right? So give us cool ideas that we can play with. You can hang that on a really generic action structure. You know, we can talk about Mad Max. Like, Mad Max is a Western. That's the structure of the latest, well, the last 3 Mad Max movies have all been Westerns. But he's throwing all of his cool ideas onto that. So then it brings up all these cool themes and ideas and stuff that I think are really exciting. There are no ideas in Tiger Man, right?
Yeah.
And then what is literature? I mean, I'm not a big literature fan, but literature has so many rules and regulations depending on what academic cult you're into. Of it has to signify this school or do this. So maybe he is playing some sort of game where if you're like, you know, like a professor somewhere of lit, like that seems like a really exciting book.
Well, that could just be like smacking Harold Bloom with a comic. A rolled
Well,
comic.
that's what I mean.
Maybe that's what he's doing,
But it's
man.
playing with simplified ideas like the paternal figure and taking it to irrational extremes, where it doesn't suit the character's motivation.
I feel like it's even a disservice to comic books because I'm not a comic book person like you, but I feel like comic books have always taken shit for being not as psychologically or thematically complicated as they really are. They always get to, it's always just like, oh, that's just the soap opera, right? Oh, that's blah, blah, blah. But it's like, even with like the good and the evil, there's always like other stuff going on, or you know, like an Alan Moore guy has to like reference all of that and throw it back on itself. So I don't even get like what it just even seemed like he didn't even know what comic books were.
Well, comic books will either go, I feel like, 2 ways. You embrace the silly, or you find the pathos.
Okay.
You know, and there was no attempt at that. There was no attempt at finding what it is about comic books that suit the elements of this story. It was just in order to make this character a little bit more interesting and have something that I'll make him a comic book fan. And there were parts of me that, you know, I've done a really good job checking lately, but I nerd rage sometimes and go, no, you do not use comic books to manipulate me in that fashion. You are the akin of the nerdy girl with glasses putting on a Superman shirt and saying, I'm just a nerd. You know?
Oh, right.
Poser.
That's a poser, yeah.
Yeah.
And that pisses off. That's a turf war.
It's
for
like,
you,
no,
isn't
you're not
it?
a poser.
Yeah.
You saw Avengers in a second-week release. Get out of my theater.
The only thing I can really say is that he is the son of John le Carre, and
Well, that's
that opens doors.
Opens doors.
Right? I mean, there's going to be people, and his father is so powerful. He's such a powerful writer that it is a small world, and I could see people like not wanting to trash the book because then you've got to deal with. I mean, I don't know. I that's the only reason I can see it getting anywhere, because I think if some dude in Minnesota wrote that, how is he going to get it published? Who's going to be interested?
Tiger shit.
I wanted. I mean, the Spook country left me feeling like that, and I'm glad you did put a background to it. I was
Okay.
sort of like, how the. This is William Gibson. This is Neuromancer. This is all that badass shit.
Well, you got to
I'm
read
like,
more of his
what
stuff.
happened
But
to
like
him,
I say,
man?
if you feel underwhelmed at the end of a William Gibson book, it's because he's intentionally put you there, because he's played with your expectations. If you feel
Literally,
underwhelmed,
I would close Neuromancer like that.
no, because Neuromancer is
Was the
also a
one.
standalone.
Okay, that's not a trilogy. That's
Well, it
just-
is, but it works as a standalone.
Okay,
'Cause-
but we're not
'cause
confirmed
the
whether
main,
Spook
the
Country
main
is or not.
character in Neuromancer, I believe, doesn't show up again except as a peripheral character in Mona Lisa Overdrive. But there's this great character he creates in Neuromancer, Molly Millions, who's this like bodyguard, and she has surgically implanted scalpel blades underneath her fingernails that she can throw out, and she's
Love that.
yeah, she's got her whole like adrenal system like jacked up so that she can like go crazy with people. I mean, she's so interesting. She ends up like playing out through the other books, and it's just like so. And that was at a time before even like Terminator. You know, he's a thoughtful guy, and so if you're feeling underwhelmed, he's doing it for a thoughtful reason. I think might not be that successful, might not go anywhere, but at the same time, you know, I finished it, and I was just sort of like, actually, when I finished the book, I was like, oh, that's so cool. I was like, he totally didn't do anything.
Right.
I felt like it adds an inaccessibility to it, because I was reading it and I was just sort of like, am I not digging this because I'm not steeped in Gibson? Like, should I know? Like, there were certain points where I was just like, should I know who this guy is? Or
there might be. I mean, some of the I haven't read the other stuff so long. Is there might be he has his universe, right?
Yeah.
So there might be people from earlier stuff coming in. I wouldn't be surprised if the next one is about the other member of the band, the guy Ishmael.
Yeah.
Because he really felt like in that Gibson way that I'm used to at this point, that was getting set up. Like he was building this guy up. And that we were going to go in this interesting direction with him, and then things are going to get really intense. He's a really, really epic writer, so he's working on a really big canvas. Or maybe he isn't. I don't know. Maybe he has in the past. Yeah, in the past he has. I don't know. There was one that he did before this that I think was another standalone pattern recognition that was really interesting. It's all about this woman. There are movie clips that have been anonymously put on the internet. It's sort of like infinite jest, I guess, that these clips are so good that people instantly get sucked into this cult of like who's making them, what are they about, how are they made, and so she's paid to basically try to find them because she has some neurological disorders that make her extremely sensitive to media and people. I mean, she's kind of autistic. And so she's like running around the globe trying to find this stuff with people messing with her. It was really, really good. Now, again, maybe that's going to end up folding back into the next thing that he does. He's in a position where, for better or for worse, he's not trying to please anyone.
The first chapter, I had written a completely different book in my head. Because I had basically
you have that ability too?
Yeah,
that's
you like
great.
that?
Yeah.
You like that? You could read it one day.
Yeah.
You know?
Great.
But I thought we were going to play with the idea of this VR, in which you can tag people who had died, and maybe what that... So even using the title Spook Country, I thought that was going to be ghosts and not Spook CIA.
I know. I wish there'd been more of that. I thought that stuff was really interesting.
That was cool. And once again, the graphic novel part, it just fit. It's kind of like this dream up that artists can have a techie, put a piece of art in a landscape where only wearing the view goggles, you know, you'd be able to see it. You know, like as soon as you said that, I was like, I can see that. Yeah. I can read that as a graphic novel.
The whole thing about cyberpunk was that it was this group of guys and some women, like Pat Cadigan and some other people, that liked science fiction, but at that point in the 70s were really sick of the space opera, really sick of the new wave stuff, and they were really into transgressive literature, like William Burroughs. I guess that's the one name I can drop.
J.G. Ballard would be in there.
J.G. Ballard would have been one of their, godfathers. And so they were interested in taking this, really, sort of like the way Trent Reznor took the industrial stuff and mixed it with Aerosmith.
Right?
I mean?
Yeah.
And then suddenly you have this, interesting, really hot, exciting thing that was, jumping and popping for a while. And I guess, so it was really more like cyberpunk as punk rock. It was, really more like an attitude. You know, it wasn't, everyone was like, oh, it's about corporations, it's about computers. And it's like, no. It's really just sort of this, style, the way that you tell this story. And then also, they're not interested in space operas. Even though Bruce Sterling, I feel like, basically did space operas, except he used corporations instead of, planets dune planets, you know, there are corporations fighting each other. So
Unless you're deep space representative, I've been deep into space operas.
there you go.
With
Space
Burn
Rap.
Revenge. And a lot of stuff that we've been talking about has been showing up in his books. In A Fire Upon the Deep, which I'm just about to finish, he has, and this is 1999 he was writing this, a whole, Burn Revenge was a professor at UCSD of science or some stuff. Of science!
How many books have you read since I finished Spook Country last night?
Right.
2. He has this whole threaded forum through billions of light speed miles that are all talking about this thing called a blight that's corrupting these systems. And people are totally jacked into what I understand is the internet. It's like a threaded chat room where people are talking about it. And I think Burn Revenge was on the early edge of such ideas and was injecting that kind of stuff into the space opera film.
See, there you go,
And-
right? So
Not to mention he has wonderful father figure roles that just grow organically.
Okay.
One of the things when I read Spook Country was like, does this just need more pages? The space opera. I'm used to cranking out a 440 pager or
like
a
I said,
700
don't
pager.
be surprised if
Um,
the actual book is, you know, 3 books that end up being like 900, 1,200 pages.
That come out apparently 11 years apart.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
Well, that is weird because he usually cranks them out, so that is a little strange. Maybe he got a stroke or something. I don't know.
Well, I mean, we could easily Google this and probably find out whether things are trilogies
got
or
time
not.
for that
But
type
yeah,
of thing?
yeah.
He's probably listening
no
to
one
us
got
right
time for
now,
that.
right?
Yes.
It's just like, oh, okay.
Billy
It's like,
Gibson.
well, now I'm going to wait another 3 years.
I got to figure out if I'm watching Extra 2 or Extra 3 tonight. So
Extra.
terrible.
What is it?
English movie from 1982. It's got what is the girl sister from the Wonder Years? Miriam Diabo.
Oh, yeah, sure.
She's naked in it.
Olivia
Diabo. Thank you. Yeah.
From the same man who nerd rages. She's naked in it. Yeah.
What's better than that? Sister from the Wonder Years. Really, really graphic, great practical effects. But I just watched Extra a couple months ago, and then I
Extro.
found out XTRO.
Yeah, Extra.
I found out it has 2 sequels,
Oh, dear.
so I have to find them.
What is it? Like, there's a...
Alien invasion, little
Oh.
kid,
Oh, wow.
terrible father,
Oh.
and
In the internet?
no
Oh.
internet, no
That
internet,
would've-
no.
Mhm. Well, all right. So those are all the books that we're going to read. Oh, what about that
We
one?
had to
No,
voice
you
our
guys-
one.
you
Move
guys
forward.
read it without me.
Always
Only
moving
Forward by Michael Marshall Smith.
I didn't make it to
Which,
that one.
Which you
I
really like.
read, and Doug, yeah.
Hey,
He
well,
comes, he's a horror writer, and he entered on a sci-fi tip and put in some nice spirit world stuff in there.
Okay. I didn't think it was bad. I just didn't really...
And you
The
read
only-
almost all of it. I had motivated you.
I read all of it, and then I
then-
read the last page. So
Wait,
that's, I did
is
read
that
all
all?
So you
or
did read
no?
all of it.
No.
He
of it.
said I
There's
read.
the way
there's
you
like
say
maybe 37 pages that I didn't read.
I read all of it, and then I read the last
yeah,
page.
that doesn't count.
But,
all right.
I mean, you told me what happened, so...
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
At a
wasn't,
play
that,
date, no
I
less.
wasn't that interested, so, I feel like I got a lot out of it. I gave him more than I give some people.
You did.
What I liked
I gave you a
about
pep
that, what I
talk
liked
there.
about that place, I liked the neighborhood. Again, I guess the sort of a theme of this show is like great concepts, right? Like great initial concepts. Maybe they didn't go anywhere for people, but I thought all that stuff was great, and I really liked there was a level of like the thing about like the cat world where it's so obviously over the top that you're suddenly like, wait a second. Either this is like him being silly and it's a silly science fiction book, or there's another game being played here, right? I got that stuff, and I like that a lot. But, in terms of like the plot and everything in the character, it just didn't.
The
Nothing
important
really.
stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned this when we met in the park that time when we
Yes.
were recording that. It really reminded me of kind of like a more heavily sci-fi Chuck Palahniuk type
Yeah.
experience.
Which I have no reference to. I've never read a word of his stuff, but
I don't think you have to.
yeah. Though others say you should.
Some people swear by him, and when you go on the internet and you look at people's profiles when they join places, it seems like everybody mentions him. It's like the books. These are the books that I really like, and I'm like, okay.
I'm convinced that 90% of the people who say they've read Chuck Palahniuk really haven't, and they've seen Fight Club.
There you go, right?
And they rented Choke, and that was it.
And that's good enough.
Yeah, and that's good enough. That's
Really,
good enough. If
like
you've
I
seen
said.
Fight Club, it's fine. It's a better movie.
You know what it was is that that guy has a really, really, really. Well, it's interesting because I can't like diss on people with loud styles because William Gibson, as we mentioned, has like this incredibly bizarre, loud Asperger. I mean, he didn't start writing until he was 40, which is interesting, right? He's an old dude, so he was writing in the mid '80s, early '80s. That's when he was 40, so he might really be like having trouble seeing the
He
keyboard.
might have thought he
Now,
wrote
almost-
something really good.
Almost
This
all of
shit's
his
great.
stuff takes place in the future, right? Like this
Yeah.
is one of the few that doesn't.
Does it?
This
It was
one,
right
this
here
one took
with
place.
us.
This one, which I thought was an interesting move on his part, and maybe he lost his bearings because, again, when you're here, the rules are different as in terms of how you play with the technology, how far you can push it, and then the other one I mentioned, pattern recognition, is present, but everything else is like total interesting, sort of apocalyptic. In the Neuromancer books, they put from Boston to Atlanta, they put like a big dome out because the air is so toxic. So it's called like Dome City, and everything outside is like, what's it called, like Dog Zero. I mean, it's really cool.
Love
Like,
that.
yeah,
Love
right.
that.
I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
heavy metal magazine, except there's this like gritty, like I said, this gritty kind of like punk rock edge to it.
I love that simplicity of just like I live in Mega City 1, and
That kind of
Yes.
stuff. That kind of stuff. Except I guess what he was doing is he was using like real world names, really grounding it to really like make you feel like you're not just escaping into this Judge Dredd type
Yeah.
world, which is
you got the
nothing
Mega
wrong with
City.
that. But so I just didn't like. I thought the style with the Mike, was it Michael? That's the
Michael
guy's name?
Marshall Smith.
I thought his style was a bit loud, and I felt like the style ended up being like the story, because by the end of the book, as you told me, everything is all about him and the voice and
read the
what he's saying. So that to me is just sort of like, that's the reason why Chuck books are so short. Like every Chuck book is like under 200, under 170 pages, because it's just this extremely loud voice, and then there's a twist.
Well, I blazed through that book very quickly, like in 3 days.
well,
But I didn't
the
think
last
it was- I
page
think it was
is
like-
one more page than I read of that book.
You should have read the last page before appearing here.
should've read the
Perhaps
last
you would have
page.
been, rapidly coming with
And then I
insights.
guess another thing, now that I think about it, speaking like the loud style, is that by the end, talking about pathos, I felt like we're really supposed to turn and find this great emotion and this heaviness with this guy, because it starts off very like light and very just sort of like, haha, this is like happening, haha. But then it's coming from this core of this horrible tragedy. I never really was there for the tragedy. I was like, I'm not buying all this emotion that I'm suddenly supposed to be tapping into. That felt like a
there's-
force, right?
There's
That was a
tragedy.
force to me.
These two gentlemen are lost into a world, which is these multiple cities with Color World, Cat City, the Red Zone, which is a horribly brutal, sex-filled, drug-filled place. And this
fun
guy
place.
can manage these terrain, and he never gets back. His parents still think, it's been 30 years, and his parents think he's dead at this point. Turns out there's another form, his friend, who is sabotaging this world, and the world you're walking in, that those strange cities are actually a place they've escaped into from this flat, like almost fairy realm with castles.
I mean, it's sort of like those monster movies where it's so great, and then you see the monster, and you're like, this is what it is.
Yeah.
Because once I sort of got the idea that was going on, I was like, oh, okay. Like, did you ever see the movie The Cell?
No.
It really, what he was doing sounded so much like The Cell, because The Cell is all about psychotherapists.
wait, the cute.
Right,
no,
that
that's
are
the
able
cute.
to enter into people's subconsciousness and, work with their fantasies. Vincent
D'Onofrio's the killer.
Jennifer
Jennifer
Lopez.
Lopez. That's right. I wanted to say J-Lo, but then I couldn't remember what her actual name was.
Right, right. It just reminded me of that. I was just like, oh, okay, so now whether he's in a world of his own invention because he's psychologically messed up, or he's actually tapped into something that has taken him into some unconscious alternate dimension. I was just like, and then what?
Well, the cool thing,
Okay,
I think a
great.
feature should be mentioned.
Pennywise versus the spider in the end.
There's a
It's like
Pennywise kind of
Pennywise
thing.
is so much scarier than the friggin' big spider
I know,
that's stealing kids.
So bad.
To access this realm, you have to have one person in a plane looking down, imagining the waves in the ocean gone. The person standing at the shore of the ocean then sees the waves gone and walks deep into the muddy ocean floor and finds the entrance. And that image alone was pretty rad for me to read. High up in the plane.
I get that. I get why.
You know,
It was cool stuff like that.
It would
but-
make a really good movie because it was really
that's-
visual.
I thought, yeah.
I mean, you could really have a lot of fun, like when he breaks out of that one world because he's in the rain system on the roof, and they get up, and then that rich girl comes by in her monocopter or something.
Yeah.
I mean, all of that stuff was very, like, I was like, oh, I can totally see this.
And those
This
are
is, like,
all,
cool.
what's it called when a studio buys a film and puts it on ice?
Option.
Or option. Michael Marshall Smith, most of his stuff is option.
Oh, okay.
He's a Philip K. Dick Award winner, and I think people are kind of onto that, just in case it might make money for you.
All right. Well, that's good. So maybe there's, if people... I mean, we can talk about Mad Max now, because one of the big tragedies I thought of Mad Max was that it did not make the money it was supposed to. And so this really cool, great science fiction movie, which then would set up the path for other people to say, oh yeah, we can do this stuff. Let's give these people creative freedom and go for it. It was out box office by, what was it, Fever Pitch, Perfect Pitch?
Pitch
Yeah.
Perfect.
Pitch
too.
Perfect
Yeah.
like, made way more money than it did.
It's
And that's the
that's the world we live in. But I mean, it didn't it do better than they thought it was going to though?
Oh, maybe. I hope.
I thought that it was
He's
going
got
to.
2 more ready to go.
I honestly feel like George
Of Mad
Miller.
Max.
Yeah, this is another trilogy. He
Okay.
came to them with 3,
And
and
so-
they said, "We'll give you 1, and if that one." Well, I'm making all of this up, but I know he's got 2 more. I know he's got 2
No,
more.
you know.
But you know.
No, because I read that he
Yeah.
wrote
Okay.
3. He wrote the story was that he didn't think that he could do anything with that stuff anymore, and then he saw Tom Hardy. Is that the guy, Tom
Yeah,
Hardy?
Tom Hardy.
And he said, "Here's somebody that can do it." And now, boom! I know what I'm going to do now. I'm going to do. And so he wrote the 3, and I'm sure they were pretty fast writes because there's, I think this one, the script. I mean, it didn't really have much dialogue in it. I mean, it's probably really. I mean, it's Wagon Train.
It's
so it's
Wagon
not like,
Train. It's
I didn't see
Stagecoach.
it.
It's basically, it's a momentum movie. It all takes place around pretty much one event, and I thought it was beautiful, man. I mean, I thought that the not only the action, the set pieces, the design was so fluid and just. I would see these things and want to know instantly so much more about this world.
There you go, right?
And it's
But the
just-
catch is you had. And so I spent a lot of time talking with people about the movie. Did you like it or not? And you had your Mad Max orthodox, if you will, who were like, he can't even have the car he has. The car was blown up, man. Okay, and so you had the continuity arguments.
Well, and then one of the girls has the
and
music box, right? And
yeah.
you're just like, wait a second.
Yeah.
He finds the music box off of a dead person at the beginning of Road Warrior.
and he gives it to the feral kid.
Right, so I think he's kind of telling you, he's like, this is sort of a sequel, but sort of not.
Yeah.
Right?
But the cool part, I think, is you can say, let's lift this world. One guy said, this would have been, I love this movie if it wasn't a Mad Max flick. If this was just Dave gets fucked in the world of apocalypse, I'm still loving it. But it blew his mind. He couldn't make the leap
Could make the leap.
because it was Mad Max, and he was a Mad Max mega camp dude. He loved that.
that
And
was
that was interesting to talk about with people, man.
Yeah, and I get that. I didn't so much get that hang up about it because I was able to. I love Mad Max, but I was able to go like I do with Batman. They're going to recreate these things. They're going to borrow
that's
some
what-
elements from it, and it's going to be fine. My wife, who had never seen a Mad Max movie, had no idea what to expect and does not curse often, came out of the theater, turned to me and said, "That was not what I was expecting," and I fucking loved it.
Cool.
And
cool.
I took that as a victory. I mean, I took that as like all right, here we go. And George Miller, I don't know if he's made a bad movie yet.
What are his movies? I couldn't
he
know.
made a movie called Lorenzo's Oil that I think is not great.
That's
That
it?
I haven't seen.
What else did he make?
Oh no!
Well,
I
okay,
mean,
so
Little Lorenzo,
Happy Feet,
Olive
all the
Oil
Mad
Maker.
Max movies.
right, all the Mad Max
Oh,
movies,
he did
Witches
all the
of
Mad Max
Eastwick,
movie. Oh,
Witches
so
of
it-
Eastwick, which
so
I
it's-
love.
wait,
I
so
love
it's
Witches of
great.
Eastwick.
This was his movie to do whatever he wanted with. Put Max's car in there, put the music box in.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Well, fuck it then. He wins.
Oh yeah, it's his deal. It's his thing.
I'm out.
He was a doctor in Australia, and he got really into the whole Australian exploitation deal, and he did Mad Max.
If you haven't seen Ozploitation, the documentary,
yeah,
it's fantastic.
isn't that great?
Man.
Yeah, yeah, so, and then he does Mad Max, and it ends up being like the highest grossing film ever in Australia. And then he does The Road Warrior. And then he does Babe. You know, he goes off in all these interesting directions.
The pig movie.
Yeah,
The Talking Pig movie.
He did both of the Talking Pig movies. And he's just really cool. Like, he's a really cool, interesting, thoughtful... He builds worlds, right? He loves building worlds, and he really gets into using, like... What I like is he uses his technology for the service of the story and the world and the characters, right? Which I think is not exactly how a lot of other people do it, where it's just sort of like the world and the characters are just there because of the technology stuff they want to play with and the tricks they want to do and things like that. So, and he just said, he's just like, I'm done. After the Tina Turner one, right? The Thunderdome, he was like, there's nothing more. I liked it because I don't really think that Tom Hardy was Max. I mean, I totally agree with somebody who says this wasn't a Mad Max. I mean, I'm sure the name is what got it paid for.
Mel Gibson was originally in the movie
Oh,
as
was
a
he?
drifter,
Oh,
and
wow.
George Miller cut his part to maintain the ambiguity of whether or not this was actually Max. But he was in as a nameless drifter, and the idea was going to be, okay, this is Max.
I think Mad Max is the name of the world, right?
Ooh.
That's, you know what I'm saying?
I love that.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how you.
That's why
think of it.
Fury Road and stuff. And this movie wasn't even about Tom. It was about Charlene or Charlene.
Charlize Theron, man.
It was her
Furiosa,
movie, right?
yeah.
That's what
She was
supposedly
like
what the
the
woman
main-
from Vagina
she-
Monologue
she had
her
the
hand in
art.
this.
Oh, was she one of the
Yeah,
older
so
women?
this was actually a secret feminist film being blown out in the Hollywood blockbuster style.
Which
There were
a lot of people are excited about.
men's rights
great.
group, and
Right.
I didn't know there were men's rights groups.
Yeah.
because we've been repressed so long.
I know.
It's
White
tough.
men
It's tough
in
being
America.
a white father.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Feel it every day.
I guess it's harder if you live in like Chicago.
Apparently. I just looked it up because I knew he directed one segment of the Twilight Zone movie, and it was it was Terror at 30,000
which
feet.
was amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Unbelievable.
That was George Miller as well?
That was George Miller
Wonderful.
as well.
Now, I have to say, as much as I liked the movie, and as much as I had a stomach ache for like the last half of it because I was so worried when the dudes with the chainsaws on the poles start going after them, I got that thing where I was like, I can't breathe.
See, that's why I probably
Right?
won't see
was
this
like,
movie. I don't want to go through
I had
that.
had a Tecate before I went in, and I was like, I shouldn't have had that Tecate. I can't breathe right now. This is really making me feel bad. Because of the women, you know, I've got two daughters, and there's such an emotional connection. And it's like the women come in and they're not victims, and they get wasted. Right?
There is some
they get
brutal
wasted.
women death in this movie too. Yeah,
So, as much as I like that, I have to say, for me,
a pregnant woman too.
I know, right?
That was like
she bought it, and she bought it in a way that wasn't over the top, melodramatic, ridiculous. It was just honestly powerful, right? I was just like, oh wow. I enjoy the world of the first Mad Max more than this post-apocalyptic one.
I do
Just
too.
me personally.
No, when there was still some semblance,
Exactly.
maybe you can hang on.
society's circling the
there's a
drain,
chance.
but
There's
you're
a chance.
Right.
The cop car still has paint.
There's enough culture, there's enough reality there so that there's an edge to it, right? There's a real serious, like, things are falling apart, but and this is like, you know, it's fantasy. It could have taken place on Mars or something. It was beautiful. I loved it.
Yeah.
But just for my own personal wish list, I have this. My own fantasy is that like the next one will take us back to like before the first Mad Max, right? Maybe a week before, right? Back to that world where like there is still law, kind of. But there's the biker culture has become dominant culture. Cars have become this, like, I'm really into that stuff.
And I'm with you
Yeah.
on that in that I like also the paint is peeling sort of element of
Yeah,
society
yeah.
crumbling, not so much because, like you said, it could have been Mars. It could have been in Fury Road. It could have been an alien world.
He tells you right when Max jumps out on that hook and is trying to escape from those guys, and then there's like 45 albino pygmies like grab him and pull him back in. I was like, okay, this is what it is.
Yeah.
Right. This is going to be that kind of experience and stuff. And he did it really well. But yeah, like I said, I think I'm more excited by the things right after it fell apart. You know, the morning after things fell apart, things like that.
And you get the more
That's you and I sitting there wondering what we do.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What do I
are we
do
doing?
now?
Because
By the way, do any of you guys have earthquake kits at your home?
oh yeah.
No, but I want.
one, yeah.
Oh, dude, I got
Bring
like,
that back to the
I got like
daddy
10
thing.
gallons of water. I got a zombie killing axe. Yeah, I'm ready
Zombie
to
killing axe. It's not the
go.
Thor hammer with the battery
It's not
operated
the Thor
hammer.
hammer. No. This is a zombie killing axe. Actually, when you look at the description on Amazon.com, it says "do not use to actually chop wood." So we'll see how it'll do against the
That's
zombie.
the coded message that it's for zombies.
Yeah. It will splice Horace bone. Like no fucking.
I put it
You're
all
like,
together
I
when
got it.
put it all together when my son was like 8 months old, so all his gear is terribly outdated. So
Oh, man.
yeah, we're
Wrong
screwed.
size diaper in
Wrong
there.
size
You're supposed to
diaper.
rotate that. Yeah.
Now
There's a Michael Haneke movie called, I think it's called Hour of the Wolf, Time of the Wolf. I keep mistaking it with
Hour of the Wolf is
Bergman.
Ingmar Bergman.
Okay, so it might be Time of the Wolf. And it's a post-apocalyptic movie that plays everything as real as you can. And it's one of the like harshest, most disturbing, it's like my kind of horror, right? Where it takes you beyond the sort of like, oh, it's just a monster poltergeist. It's like, oh my God, this is what life really
Like
is.
when you referred to me to watch 29 Palms.
Yeah.
Isn't that a very horrible,
Yeah.
horrible movie? Yes, I think
did
I
I-
blocked
did
it
I
out.
tell you
Yeah,
to
you
go
said
see
it.
that?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
When I drive out to the desert, I still imagine shit happening in small hotels.
That's a great
like that.
movie.
Yeah.
Wow. That's my kind of
Yeah.
horror.
No, I can't
Because
do that
once you
anymore.
get into the
Disturbing.
once you get into the level where you're like deciding, do you want to be like the football biker gear? You're embracing a level of silliness,
Right.
but that like Brazil Terry Gilliam, like guys in really interesting fashion. Like I love the first Mad Max where there's bureaucrats that show up,
Exactly.
and they're all wearing like really silly suits, kind of.
Right. Because things are dangerous, but it also is still fashionable.
Still
right? There's
fashionable.
still fashion
There's
to it.
still bureaucracy, and one of the reasons you suggested those two movies, The Rover and
That was I just forgot. I was like, there's another example of this that I'm trying. The Rover is
Rover
exactly what I'm talking about.
That was great, man.
This is an amazing,
Really
amazing
a
movie.
quiet flick. You know, this movie starts off basically in the middle of another movie.
Right.
There is a dead soldier, 3 guys on the run, and within the first 10 minutes, a bearded Guy Pearce is sitting down at a makeshift bar in post-economic collapse Australia, taking a drink, and you just see this horrible car accident silently happening behind him, and you just know what you're in for the rest of it. It's going to be this quiet movie
can see it.
punctuated by like a punch every now and then. And
'Cause
the
this
punches
guy-
are violent.
Because he plays the world real. It's
Yeah.
like there is no law, there is no order anymore. So people just kill each other left and right. And then one of my favorite scenes is the whole movie is about he's looking for his car. And there's a payoff to that, right? But you don't think so because everything's so low key. You're just like, oh, he's just a crazy guy, and the only thing that matters to him is his old Ford or whatever. But he goes into this makeshift store, and he's like, have you seen these people that have my car? And the guy's like, you have to buy something. And he's like, well, I've got this money. I'll just give you the money. I just want to know, have you seen it? And the guy's like, you're in a store. You have to buy something. Right? Like, this is society. This is the world. You must.
Yeah.
We have cans of fish. We have soap. Buy something. And then there's a guy behind him, like, with a gun or a baseball bat. like must
you should
buy
buy
something.
You are in a store.
Yeah.
This is what we do
That's
in a
cool.
store.
Right. I was really, really happy with that.
I dug
And the
that.
critics missed it. I didn't read one review of that where everyone was just sort of like, oh yeah, it's just kind of weird. Because again, that movie is sort of like, it's not really a science fiction movie, it's not a drama, it's not an action film. It's my perfect movie, right? It's a transgressive film that just slips between the cracks of everything.
Flew under the radar. It's got the curse kind of having Robert Pattinson from Twilight in it, who is great in it.
He's amazing.
Plays this southern kid who came to Australia because of all the mining there, and it's just everyone's trying to
Obviously,
eke out this
sort of
living.
mentally retarded.
Sort of slow, and
But not in an
helping this
annoying
guy.
John Steinbeck, tell me about the rabbits kind of way. Even though that's sort of the way that the character was built up. That was really, really good. Did you guys get a chance to see The Young Ones?
I saw it.
No.
Yeah.
All right. What do you think of that?
I liked it a lot. I'm not so certain about the ending.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So this is a very interesting movie because this is a science fiction movie that I would say, even though it's shot like a Western and it has obvious Western elements, right, that are like the music and other, land on the prairie and the frontier, I feel that it's really a science fiction film. And what I like about it is that it's a science fiction film that's not an action film, right? It's not like a thriller. It's this very interesting story about there's no water, and there are people that live in the desert, homesteading, who are convinced that they're going to try to get water somehow, and then just sort of like, and then it goes like, talking about John Steinbeck, it goes John Steinbeck. It becomes like East of Eden.
Yeah,
and it becomes this intergenerational tale of like these really, I'm still trying to figure out, because the ending,
where
like,
it actually passes the torch
Right.
on screen and tells you the movie is now about this person.
it's 3 different movies, and it's about a father, his son, and then the man who murders the father.
Who also marries his daughter.
And it stops, right? It stops at the end of each of them, and then we'll either like rewind or go to a different perspective, or sort of like a Pulp Fiction way of dealing with an alienator story. And I was so just like, I felt like all of the special effects. It's a low budget movie, but all the special effects seemed exactly like what you would want for this world. Like, I didn't feel like they were trying to show off.
It's
or
playing
do
it
anything.
real again. It's
Yeah,
like
it plays
made
everything
sense.
really
you
real.
have a little drone that's watering some of the plants. You've got this basically just a robotic donkey rolling around, and you get pieces of the anarchy, like when they're at the border. You see the police state that state borders have become.
And then you have a taste of the city, and suddenly the city, you're like, holy shit, this is like, not like a Blade Runner thing, but this is what the city would be.
Yeah.
Right? He's not trying to pastoralize the entire... But I agree with you. I'm still trying to figure out, because the kid, he's an artist and he draws ears, right? And I'm like, what's the symbolism of the ear? Is that about hearing? And then the way that it ends, I'm like, is this really... It didn't seem like it was about a boy who becomes a man kind of story. But the way that it ends, I was just sort of like, what is, I mean, really, I'm scratching my head right now. I was like, it's Gwyneth Paltrow's brother made it. Jake Paltrow made it, and he's made.
I didn't know that.
Jake.
Yeah, he's done like a lot of TV, and this was like obviously something that he really cared about.
What I loved is that it's another movie that I saw Nicholas Hoult in, because he was also in Mad Max Fury Road.
Exactly, there's another
in which
connection.
I'm like, okay, this guy's breaking out of his mold.
Totally.
He's a great character.
He's not in, like, what was his first movie? About a boy? He was
About
the
a
little boy in
and
About a
then he was
Boy.
in Jack and the Giant Slayer.
He was on that TV show Skins, and now he can do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
Right? So he'll probably be in the next 50 Shades of Grey movie or something.
Or he'll be in Spook
give
Country
money.
when they adapt it into trilogy.
No one has ever adapted his stuff, right?
There's never been a Neuromancer movie?
In the 80s, it was like Ridley Scott was going to do it with Peter Gabriel playing the lead character, which
Really?
would have been really interesting, because that's the hacker, this guy Case. And since then, I don't know if it's lack of interest. He was pegged to write one of the Alien movies, right? He said, hey, I don't want to do it. I'm not into movies. I've never written a screenplay. They gave him so much money that he wrote it. I read the screenplay. It's whatever the last one was that the French guy did. The Alien
Prometheus.
Resurrection. The one where they're underwater swimming around and stuff.
Oh,
Not
that...
Prometheus?
No. The straight up Alien one.
Yeah.
That's mostly taken from the William Gibson screenplay, which
Joss
is horrible.
Whedon ended up writing that.
Okay, yeah, it's a terrible, terrible screenplay.
Terrible
So generic. It's like they're in a spaceship. Ripley's thing gets to the spaceship. The alien is unleashed in the spaceship, and they're like, "Uh-oh!" And then it's like,
cloned and this whole mess of
it's really bad. But I mean, he would be someone that it would be great for HBO or somebody to do like some really hot miniseries. Like, I don't know if you watch Orphan Black or something like that.
I haven't seen Orphan Black.
It's kind of interesting.
I've seen.
I feel like there's a really good one. The one that I would plug is this Canadian show called Continuum, which is amazing.
You've told me about it, yeah.
It's so good. It's this cyberpunk, time travel, techno terrorist thriller, which is like the best thing best science fiction I've ever seen, like on television. It's so good. And I feel like that means that you could do stuff like he does, like the William Gibson tweaky story. It would be retro now, because it's like his vision of the internet is not what the internet is. So if you go back and you read those books, you'd have to make it sort of almost like a Terry Gilliam alternate reality people are jacking in, and there's like, they're breaking ice, but it's like they're little video game figures flying around and stuff. That's sort of what he was doing.
I have a question before we come to the top of our hour here.
Okay.
In Spook Country, there is a junkie who's captured by a agent, and he's given pills daily, and they share hotel rooms.
Oh, yeah.
And in between the hotel room door, the split room, he opens up, and the agent keeps putting something like a can or something in between the doors. And he said, I'll know if you're out. What the hell was that thing?
I don't know.
Do you remember this detail?
No.
All right, let's not even pick it up. Anyways, the junkie won't leave because of this thing in between the two rooms.
Well, there are a lot of like mind games, right? That was my
They could have just
impression.
been messing with him. Yeah,
That was why I liked their relationship, was that he got a little. He was never less of a junkie, but he got more into the fact that this. I don't think the guy was CIA. I think he was like ex-CIA or something, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
there
had
was
stolen this money
rogue
and-
forces.
Right,
there.
they had
kind
stolen the money from Iraq and were trying to like get it. Right, they're trying to grab it.
All on the nose.
I know, right?
It's like, that's what was disappointing.
So silly.
It was like,
I know, it was really
we're
silly.
irradiating $100 million for the Iraqi government.
You know what it reminded me
Because
of?
he was
as
a-
much as I like William Gibson, was like in those Austin Power movies where Dr. Evil or Professor Evil is always like, and I want $300,000 or I'm going to blow up New York.
I
right?
still laugh my ass off at that zoom in the first one when he says, because if you're a bad guy in 1962,
Right.
$1 million is
Right.
a ton of money.
Right.
You know, I love that. I freaking love that joke.
It seemed, for all that time and trouble for a tractor trailer of $100 million. Again, that's sort of like the problem, is that if it's going to be like that realistic, why this super blue ant, powerful organization? Make it low rent, like make everything more on scale. To
Yeah.
that, I
Well, that's
feel
why
like.
I called it cute. It was like, great. We got a lot of money. We got some rogue spies. This shit wraps
Right.
up. Thanks.
And maybe
what-
it's the 2006-ness of it, but $100 million doesn't even seem like that much money anymore.
No,
as
they were
sad
just
as that is.
no. They were making a stab at the people who ripped at the government who ripped us off. I mean, that was his little point.
Instead
too.
of stealing a canister, it's like start Facebook.
Yeah, right,
right. Make so much more money that way. Like, you guys are going through so much trouble.
We've got the prototype to
He's
Google's
like, you
new
use
phone.
magnets? He's like, all you gotta do is get them talking about their friends and shit, and then it just, whoa! Take all that information. Yeah. Well, so what are the things that we're gonna try to hit next? Are there any summer sci-fi movies that you guys are tapped into?
I wouldn't know. Movies is my deficit in my daddy sci-fi attempts.
Jurassic World came out yesterday. Apparently, had the biggest opening Friday ever.
Of course,
No kidding.
of course, yeah.
Oh.
I have no intention of seeing it anytime soon. Everything that I hear, is that it's basically the first one, bigger, louder.
Yeah, that's all I've heard too. They had a scientist on like one of the KPCC
I heard
shows.
it, yeah.
Didn't he
It was
sound
not
like he
Larry
was sort of like
Mantle.
eating shit the whole time?
Yeah, he
she was
sounded
just
like-
they're like, wow, with you on board, these things must really be realistic. But how come they're not wearing feathers? And he's like,
We dealt with that. We dealt
tried.
with that. You'll notice. And they say, because he says in the movie, they address it. These
Right.
were transgenomes, transgeneric animals, so they didn't get the whole gene.
Like, personally, I wanted them to have feathers, but there was this guy in the boardroom
Because he's
with
a real
cigar the entire
scientist, like
time.
the leading paleontologist in the world. He happens to wear a advisory hat for all the Jurassic Park, so he's making up
You
shit
think it
while at the
got
same
right.
time solving riddles about dinosaurs.
it's an interesting position to be in.
Well, we should read something. This being book
Okay,
club
all
and
right.
all.
Well, I was
But-
going to suggest for a movie. You mentioned Terry Gilliam, who's one of my favorites.
Me too.
Yeah.
Have you seen Zero Theorem yet?
I
His
haven't.
latest?
No.
I would love to talk about that.
All right,
because I watched
can
it.
plan to watch a movie. Yeah.
I feel like it's got a ton of ideas. It didn't land at all for me, but I love the direction he's going in anyway, because I feel like here is someone who should be allowed to use CGI for whatever he wants, right? With his imagination.
His imagination.
Like I was a real big fan of the one that Heath Ledger died on, the
Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus.
yeah. I wouldn't say it wasn't like entertaining as much, but I was just like, oh, this guy's really playing around with these cool ideas. So that one's out. It's on VOD. You can see it.
All right.
It's very interesting. Matt Damon's in it. I won't try to sell it any more than that.
Yeah, I'm in.
Pretty easy to watch. I watched it, being a daddy, I watched it in like 5-minute increments over the period of like, I think, a month. Which is so like, okay.
All right, I'm down with that. Recently, you see Ghosts of Mars?
I love Ghost of Mars.
I love Ghosts of Mars.
I would like him to do more stuff like that too. He did. Did you see his haunted house movie that he did? It was a haunted insane asylum.
No.
I forget what it is. It was called, but it's a retro girls psychiatric haunted house movie. It's pretty good. Really well made. It's one of those where you sort of know what's going to happen, and then you're like, oh, all right, another one of those. But I like the fact that he's still getting money. I mean, Carpenter is.
You get the check when you get a chance?
Oh, you guys
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But
Have a
Get
nice
out of
day.
here. Okay, thanks.
No more water? Where's that?
We're great.
set.
Thank you.
Okay.
I would be totally down for talking about Ghost of Mars, comparing it to anything, because that's another one where it's like
Why
a
don't
lot
we
of.
toss some Mars in the whole...
Oh.
Well,
What about the whole John Carter Mars thing? You know,
Are
the
those books?
no, the movie, full movie with the.
I'm going to put that whole thing in there to give her a big tip for camping
okay.
intersection.
Well... Or, we could go back and do some Martian Chronicles.
Yeah.
What?
You mean watching or
Reading? No.
I don't know.
No.
Ray Bradbury.
No.
love Bradbury.
There's I'll throw this on the table. We'll discuss it. Find out. Werner Vinge has
Vinge?
written. Well, here's why. Werner Vinge takes you. Here's why. Werner Vinge is deep space, but his latest is called Rainbow's End, and it happens in 2025 in a mild-mannered, futuristic San Diego, where the singularity has happened. AI has done its thing.
Oh, hey, but that's
and
kind of like
it
what
deals
I'm
with-
interested in.
there's actually an Alzheimer's medicine or treatment in there. And,
Okay.
it's,
And is
so-
it like 1,500 or 2,200 pages? Is it one of his shorter ones?
It arrives once
Fire
a month.
Punda Deep is 440.
It arrives
That
once
was
a month
short.
to your
Right.
door.
You see him like writing this
Like,
stuff,
it's
and he's
like
like,
a-
oh, I'm so good, I'm so good.
This
Like,
one
oh, there's
float.
some more singularity.
This one guy keeps reading it. So
Well, that's the thing. See, he's been working his way towards that. Now, he's finally addressed the singularity, I think.
Okay.
He predicted. Werner Vinge said in 30 years this will happen upon us. Don't know when he said it. If he said it in 1990, well, we're in
coming on
trouble.
the cusp.
But I don't. Yeah, but anyways.
Oh, the singularity. I can't wait.
That sounds like fun. I like the other Werner Vinge.
Let's do a
Did
page.
we do that as a book club, or was that?
We
just
did
a-
Marooned in Real Time.
Okay. Well, I like that one.
That was great. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was how I remembered that name.
It had a really good kind of like old school Robert Heinlein tone to it, but then like once you started realizing how deeply messed up everything was and how accurate I felt like he was being with the whole freezing people or bubbling them or whatever, and
Cold Sleep.
stealing
Well, there's-
money
yeah,
and
he's great.
this is the land at the end of time, and yeah.
He's a man who takes that sort of basis of real science and then just rides it. The ideas realm that we're in as daddies attempting to read sci-fi.
Instead of
Yes.
window
Yeah.
dressing, I guess what we talked about a lot today was that we've been looking at stuff recently where a lot of it was just window dressing, and frustratingly because window dressing for what, right? Not even like window dressing for a window that itself had really interesting other things that it was doing
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a movie, Zero Theorem. We got
Yeah.
Werner Vinge. It's called
Rainbow's End.
Rainbow's End.
Okay, I can remember that. I'm not even going to write it down. And
We'll text it out.
then whatever else comes out.
Yeah.
Seems like
Yeah.
a lot of
It
TV
Seems
shows.
like a lot of things just kind of rolled in. I'm
And
gonna
maybe
check
we'll
out
get to meet
Continuum.
actually in a month. Maybe
Oh,
not.
well, that's another thing,
I
right?
disappear in August. So before August 4th.
Okay.
Because I will go from August 4th to September 27th.
Okay, I'm on vacation sometime in July, but I don't know when.
Okay.
Sometime.
I'm here all week, boys.
Yeah. Just growing a second baby, all right?
Growing a second baby.